So now we're up to chapter 14, the Roman Republic. So the Roman Republic was established after the last Etruscan king got overthrown in a rebellion. And the Republican is something that where people choose their leaders. This is a famous painting of Lucretia. If you remember the story about her, Tarquinius Superbus's son went ahead and attacked her, and then basically he got overthrown partially because of that. So that's that's according to legend how the Roman Republic got established. Now, the Romans were divided into really two classes. There were the patricians, who were the wealthy landowners who had power, and the plebeians, they were the poor farmers and artisans who had very little power. This is an image of plebeians as they're wandering. Trust me, patricians would have someone else to do these jobs for them. Now, the problem is the plebeians outnumbered the patricians 9-1. Plebeians had to pay taxes, could serve in the army, were citizens, but could not serve in Roman government. And if they got into enough problems in terms of debt, they could be sold into slavery. Now that's a picture of what patricians might have looked like. In terms of the government, at the top were two councils, and they were chosen each year. And this was something that happened for a long time, and it was very prestigious to have that happen. And they acted as military and administrative leaders and could veto anything that was done by the assemblies that we're going to deal with in a second. Now, the Senate was chosen up of senators who were chosen for life, and that's sort of a classic image of the senators. And yes, that's what the Senate is named after in American politics. Senators handled day-to-day government, proposed laws, discussed foreign policy, gave out public contracts, did a lot of the main government, and also advised the councils as well. The rights of the plebeian were protected by different assemblies. The judges and tribunes, all Roman citizens could belong to assemblies if they were actually Roman citizens, and these assemblies declared war and peace. And this is Senate Popularis Romanus, I believe is the actual phrase, and that's basically from the Senate and people of Rome. Now the laws that were established, they were recorded on something called the 12 tables. That's an image of them. They were posted in the form so people could actually see laws, and that's pretty good idea to actually have the laws out there so people could actually see what they're doing or what they're doing wrong. Now, in terms of Roman expansion, it started off relatively small. As you can see in this map over here, we got Rome over here, and gradually, bit by bit, the Romans were worried about the Etruscans coming back to take them over, so they conquered some Etruscan cities, and eventually they took over all of them. And Rome either conquered people or made alliances with them, but really by 146 BC, it was the leading power of the Mediterranean. Its army was very powerful and successful. And that's mainly due to this guy here. Now, the army was divided into legions that could fight into smaller groups and phalanxes. This was just the phalanx with joints is the way that it was referred to, the legionary system, legion system. Each legion was made up of soldiers called legionaries, and legionaries were very well trained and disciplined, and you can see all the stuff that they had in them. Really very well trained group of guys. Romans were mild rulers at first, expected people they conquered to provide soldiers, support Roman foreign policy, but allowed them to keep really their own form of government, provided it was in line with what the Romans wanted as well. The conquered people did not have to pay taxes, so it was only Roman citizens. Since the Romans were fair, they made friends out of a lot of the people that they conquered, and they really Romanized, is the actual term, a lot of them, and eventually they did become citizens. Now, section 3, the big group that the Romans fight against are the Carthaginians, and that's a series of wars called the Punic Wars, and that's from the root for Phoenicians, because Carthage, where the Punic Wars sort of, that was the power Carthage that the Romans were fighting, and Punic is similar to the term Phoenician, and that's, Carthage was a Phoenician colony. There was a series of 3 wars between Rome and Carthage. Carthage controlled much of South Mediterranean, Rome controlled the north. You can see that in Africa. And the Romans, they, like I said, very good at the army, and the Carthaginians much better at the navy. And the first war started when Rome kind of went after the Carthaginian colony of Sicily. And if you remember here, Sicily is this right down here. And the war lasted for about 25 years, really because on land, the Romans were better on, Carthaginians were better on sea, so it's kind of hard to invade. But the Romans eventually became better in the sea and then won the war. They got and got Sicily. One thing that they did use, at least for a little bit, was something called the corvus. This is a kind of something that they were able to just lower down so they'd actually be able to march onto the ships, sort of like a drawbridge for your ship. But also they would take grappling hooks and they'd go ahead and wreck the sails of the Carthaginian ships and really just immobilize them. And just the tactics, they got better at sea fighting. Now the second war, Hannibal led an army of elephants against Rome and attacked the Romans from the north, all the way around through Spain and all that. Now Hannibal was able to surround Rome, but was unable to take it over because he didn't have the equipment to break down the walls, which were pretty good to there. And Rome at this point controlled the sea, so she could not really get it. At that point, it was just a problem, so they just didn't have the materials to take him out. And what happened was that Carthage destroyed the area around Rome, but never really took it over, never really took the capital. Rome then attacked Carthage, and Hannibal was called back to defend it. But that's not before this battle. This is the Battle of Cannae, and this is probably one of the most famous battles you can see here. What ended up happening was Hannibal set out his troops, and his weakest troops were out front here. He knew the Romans would come in, rush in, and then what they did was they sort of like were pushed back, and eventually what ended up happening was they were pushed back far enough that they were able to push them in, get them in on the sides, and then they came around with the cavalry because they had attacked the Roman cavalry. This is kind of the classic battle that occurred that even military historians still study today. Hannibal ended up losing the Battle of Zama when the Carthaginians called him back. Carthage had to give up all their territories and pay lots of money to Rome. The third war, the Romans attacked Carthage because they were concerned about them maybe becoming a little bit more powerful. They burned the city to the ground, plowed salt into the fields, and sold the people into slavery. This is the same year that the Romans took over Greece by defeating Corinth as well. So lots of expansion that year for the Romans. In terms of the effects of conquest, there are some pretty serious ones. The wealth and the land that the Romans acquired changed Roman life. One of the big things was that the agricultural changes. There ended up being, once the Romans had been attacked by Hannibal, went ahead and destroyed a lot of the farmland, and so really only rich people could go ahead and fix the farmland afterwards. So a lot of poor people sold their land, and this started the move to latifundius, which are these large farms, and Rome started using more slaves, and so there ended up being more people who were dispossessed of their land. And farmers who sold their land frequently moved to the city rather than to work someone else's land. Living conditions were very bad, and few could make money. And this is an image of a Roman model. Again, a little bit from the Roman Republic, because you can tell that because it has the Colosseum. But you get an idea. Very busy, very crowded. In terms of the decline of the Roman Republic, there are problems because the Republic started to demand taxes from the conquered people, which got them more upset. Publicans were these guys who collected taxes, and what they did was kind of a little bit sneaky and underhanded. They would go ahead and take more. They'd bid and they'd say, for this region here, I'm going to collect this amount of taxes and give it to you, and whoever bid the most got to collect the taxes. And then the problem was that there weren't any restrictions on how much they could actually collect. They just had to turn over the amount that they went ahead and were actually said that they were going to collect in their contract. So they tended to rip people off a lot. Overall, the rich were getting richer, the poor were worse off since they didn't have land, and the merchants made less money, and the poor hated the rich, and the rich feared the poor. So lots of problems. In terms of leadership, some guys came up who tried to fix some of these problems. A couple of them were called the Gracchi brothers. One of them was called Tiberius Gracchus, who was a tribune, and tribunes were these guys who were supposed to look out for the needs of the poor. There were positions that were elected, and then there were people who were supposed to look out and make sure that the rights of the plebeians were looked after. And so he wanted to limit the amount of land a person could own so small farmers could keep their lands. He also wanted to give some public lands to the poor, but he was killed in a riot staged by his opponents because they were worried that he was getting too popular. His younger brother was another guy who also served as tribune. He continued his brother's reforms and had the government sell wheat cheaply, which made people happy, but the senators feared his popularity with the poor and had him killed too. Again, a lot of the rich guys in the Senate worried about those poor people. Now, there were some generals who also tried to reform some things. Gaius Marius was a general who reformed the army. He tried to set up a professional army where soldiers were paid. And the problem was, up until that point, really, it was kind of more something where it wasn't a year-long profession. You could just be called up. The problem was is that the army then became more loyal to their commander than to Rome. And the idea being that all of a sudden, if he's the guy who's paying you, and he's the guy when you take over an area, he's the guy who decides who gets what, then you're going to really want to be on his good side. Another guy was Lucius Sulla, another general who used his army. When he disagreed with the government in Rome, he actually marched on Rome with his troops and became a dictator. But he did step down, so thumbs down on the dictator thing, thumbs up on the actual stepping down. He hated Marius and had lots of problems with him and his family. And when he came into Rome, he purged Rome and went ahead and killed lots and lots of people. But he did step down after a while. Julius Caesar is the most famous one. When Sulla retired, a triumvirate, 3 people with equal power, came to power a little bit after that. Julius Caesar, Pompeius, or Pompey the Great, and Crassus. And Pompey was this great military general. Julius Caesar was a speaker, a great political speaker. Crassus was the richest guy in Rome. After Crassus died, Julius Caesar and Pompeius fought, and Julius Caesar did win. The Senate was worried about Julius Caesar becoming too powerful, but eventually he had gone off to Gaul to conquer that area, and this was with the Senate's approval. And when he came back, he was so rich from conquering that area and so many slaves and things like that, that people were just worried about it. And so when he came in, people told him to leave his army behind. He was worried that if he did leave his army behind, he'd be put on trial. So he marched into Rome with his army, and really they couldn't do anything about it. That's when Pompey kind of hightails it out of there, and he became dictator. Eventually Pompey gets assassinated in Egypt. Julius Caesar made many reforms, including giving land to his soldiers, providing more for the poor, and making senators less powerful. The senators were worried about Julius Caesar making himself a king, so they killed him in the Senate, and that's the assassination of Julius Caesar. Lots and lots of stabbing in that incident. At the end of the Republic, though, what ends up happening is that's really when these people thought that they were going to bring back the Republic by killing off Julius Caesar, that really leads to the imperial system starting. And so it's kind of ironic that way. People turned against those who had killed Julius Caesar because he was pretty popular with the regular people. And then the triumvirate took control. Guys, Mark Antony who was Caesar's kind of right-hand military man. Octavian, who was his grandnephew, was kind of surprised that all of a sudden he just got all this stuff in the will. And Lepidus was another person that isn't all that major, but he was one of the second triumvirate. Fights eventually broke out, and Octavian took over, and he really became the first emperor, although he didn't actually take the name emperor. And there we go.